Okay. Jocko, what do you think of people in leadership roles who cuss? I see it in coaching. Guys either totally use it or are totally against it.
So, swearing, cussing, using foul language. I think this is a pretty straightforward question. I can tell you that by no means am I a saint. And I was in the SEAL teams for 20 years. Mm-hmm. And when you've heard the term swear like a sailor, mm-hmm. there's actually a level beyond that, and that's swearing like a SEAL. Yeah. And so I've there's times in the SEAL teams where literally, every single word in a sentence would be, a swear word. And that's something that when I go back and brief the SEAL teams right now on something, I go almost right back into that mode. Not quite as bad as I probably was at the high point of my career, mm-hmm. where I was well rehearsed and well trained at foul language. Mm-hmm. But hey, here's the deal. On a forum like this, where we're on a podcast where many people listen to this, including kids and my kids, and I try and utilize better language. Now, and I'll tell you what, I actually had a point where I sort of said to myself, yeah, I'm not going to do that. And I heard a podcast.
Wait, you're not going to do what?
I'm not going to swear a lot. I'm not going to I'm not just going to swear the whole time in a podcast. And this actually happened because I heard a podcast. I listened to a podcast where it was a conversation, normal podcast. There was a conversation going on between two people, and they were swearing so much that I just said to myself, man, this sounds ridiculous. It sounded completely ridiculous. Mm-hmm. And I just decided and this was before we started our podcast. This was, maybe like 2 years ago. I mean, it was a long time ago. I heard this podcast and I just said to myself, man, these people sound stupid mm-hmm. with so much swearing. And it wasn't, the thing is, like, you listen to Joe Rogan or like a comedic podcast and they're swearing, and some people, like, for instance, Joe Rogan, he swears, he does it at the right time, yeah. and it has comedic impact, or it has value when he does it. So that's understandable. But I've heard people that they just, it ends up having no impact other than just to make you say, this person's not very smart.
Right.
So with that, I just try to keep it clean. Actually, it's not even almost like I don't consciously sit there and try and keep it clean, but, I try and keep it clean.
Yeah. Is that kind of like, how people, most of us have this, I don't want to say problem, but we always say like
very similar,
like how it just did.
Yes.
And am doing that. So kind of like that.
Yeah, it is. It's the same thing where when you hear someone saying like, as soon as you might not even recognize it at first because we're so used to hearing it.
Yeah.
But if you pick up on it and you're listening to a podcast and you start to hear someone do that, it's the same thing. You just say, wow, this person really sounds stupid. And they might be smart, but this person sounds really stupid, and I'm not going to sound like that. So that's pretty much where my opinion comes from and why. And you know what? I have had a couple people hit me up and say, hey, this is the only podcast that I listen to that my kids can listen to.
Yeah.
And that's kind of cool. I appreciate that. It's pretty humbling to hear that people are, sitting there listening to podcasts with their kids.
Yeah.
And I guess humbling is the wrong word, which somebody hit me up on Twitter. It's an honor.
Right.
And it's an honor that doesn't feel like I deserve, but it's an honor to hear somebody sitting around and say, oh, I listen to this podcast with my daughter, or I listen to your podcast with my son, and it's so many good lessons to learn. And that feels pretty good.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so if I was to throw that out the window so that I could drop some F-bombs, it doesn't really seem worth it.
Yeah.
Because what kind of a linguistic command do I have if the only way I can get my point across is by using foul language.
Yeah.
You know? And the funny thing is, too, well, I used to go, when I was in the SEAL teams, I would go and literally, like I said, I would have whole sentence constructions that would be nothing but F-bombs, right? Yeah. And I would come home, and in front of my six-year-old kid or whatever, I never swore in front of my kids. Mm-hmm. And people would be kind of surprised, like if I had a SEAL buddy over, and they'd hear me talk in my house, and they'd say, how do you even do that? And I don't know why, I've just been able to do it. So that was another thing. These podcasts, when you go on the interwebs, they're there for, I hate to say it, but they're there forever. I mean, you can take them down, but these are out there. So if you want to be represented that way for the rest of your life, then you got to be a little bit careful about what you're saying.
Yeah. That's, cause I kind of like swear. No, I don't like to swear, but I like when people swear and stuff. I think but just like how you were saying, like, for example, Joe Rogan, like he'll swear and sometimes he'll swear a lot, but it's perfect. It's funny when it needs to be funny. It emphasizes, a certain emotion when it needs to. It's perfect. And that's kind of the reason why I like it. Cause sometimes it can be really funny. It can be fun to do. But overall, there's a certain kind of, you can't help but kind of respect someone who doesn't like use the word like all the time, or that doesn't say all the time, or who doesn't say all the time, or know what I'm saying, or whatever, and can control that. And I think swearing is yet another one of those things that some people, it's more of a weakness where they don't know how to use it really. Right, they just swear because they swore. My parents swore, so I swear. Who cares? Kind of thing. Yeah. And on top of that, you do have to consider who you're talking to. And in a podcast situation, you're essentially talking to everybody, regardless of who you're trying to talk to, who you think or want your audience to be. It's everyone. And anyone who presses the button is going to be listening. So if you don't care how you come off, then good. Then that's great. But I think you do have more of a control on how you come off when you can control how much you swear or don't swear.
Well, I haven't had anybody hit me up on Twitter and say, hey, you really need to swear more, right? It doesn't happen. No one said, hey, you need to say more, or you need to say like more. Yeah. People don't need to hear that. They accept it because it's there. And I'll tell you the first time I used to take my son out occasionally to various SEAL training sites, in order to inoculate him to violence and firearms and machine guns and war.
Sure.
And yes, you people can all call child services on me. But it was funny the first time, he watched a SEAL platoon do some event, and I think it was at a urban training facility, and they got done, and I was debriefing them. And, this is my son who had never heard me swear, and who he was at that age where, a swear word was like the worst thing ever. Yeah. And he was standing there, and I debriefed these guys, and I debriefed them in the proper SEAL technique. And I got done, and he had a look on his face that said, wow, this guy is a little bit different than what I knew. And he was pretty shocked, and it was a pretty funny scenario.
So how you say you don't swear in front of your kids? Why is that? Because you don't want them to swear, or is there a specific reason?
I mean, there is. If you ever see and I do, now that my daughters are a little older, I'll drop some swear words in them occasionally for impact or for humor, or for whatever. So I will do it. But if you ever see a young girl swearing, you see a young boy, it very much seems disrespectful, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So I don't want my kids to be running around with a foul mouth. Now, I took my son and a couple of his buddies, went on a little surf trip, and they were sleeping in a tent outside of, and I was in the camper, and I woke up at when I normally wake up, and they were up early to go surfing as well. But I was standing outside their tent, and I was pretty impressed with the wide array of foul language that they produced.
Yeah, and that's kind of the thing too, right? So it doesn't. If you'd never swear to your kids, it's not like you have protected them from swearing.
So that's my point. Is that after I stood out there for a while, and I listened to them, and then I said something along the lines of, "Hey, are you guys done? And are you ready to go surfing?" And my son says, "How long have you been out there, Dad?" And I swore back at him. I swore back at him and said, "I've been out here long." Yeah. And then they kind of remained quiet for a second, and then they started laughing. I said, "All right, boys, let's go." I'm not a goody two shoes. I understand. And we talked about Patton. Patton swore.
That's insane,
incessantly amongst the troops, and then when he'd get in front of the politicians, he would not. And I guess I would hope to behave that way. And I used to do that too. I used to go. When we got back from Ramadi, I had to go and brief the Secretary of the Navy. I had to go brief the Joint Caucus. I mean, I had to go and brief some high-level governmental officials and whatnot. And I would just walk in there and not. Obviously, you're not going to swear in front of them. Yeah. So I think that's another situation where you've got to know and understand when to swear and when not to swear. Yeah. And hopefully I'm making the right decisions. And like I said, no one has hit me up and said, "You really need to use more foul language."
Yeah.
And there's times where we've used foul language on the podcast because, hey, it's a reality. It's a reality of Vietnam. It's a reality of all wars.
Yeah.
So to exclude it like it doesn't exist is not what I'm trying to do here.
Yeah. And that's kind of a big, in my opinion, a big deal when someone, you can tell they're actively pursuing not swearing, where in any kind of, especially in a casual conversation where they're about to say something and then they use like, I don't know, sugar, I don't know, those obvious replacement words, which there's nothing wrong with it, but it does kind of make you think, oh wait, like we can't just be ourselves right now, like I don't know, it feels like you might not be able to relate to it. You
know what's interesting is you've seen Full Metal Jacket, and just an amazing movie about the Marine Corps, and the whole first 45 minutes is boot camp, and it's played by Lee Ramey, I think is his name, and he was a real drill instructor, and so he just nails it. And I remember when my son was 6 or 7 years old, I thought to myself, I'll play him some of this movie. I'll just find some parts that don't have any foul language. There are no parts. The whole thing is just completely over the top, and it's awesome. So there's definitely a time and a place for it. The other thing is, for me, honestly, I'm always trying to do better at stuff. There's a challenge in trying to find words that are going to have impact without just going right to the easy button on the big F-bomb, because that's going to have impact. But if that's what you need to use, then it's just a little easy out that I don't want to take every single time it presents itself. And I'll tell you, when there's been a couple times with my kids where they've stepped over the line, they did something out of line. And when I've sworn at them, it was like I slapped them in the face because it was having that much impact. Whereas if I was just throwing it around all the time, it's taking away the impact of it. Right. Yeah, so strategically, it has strategic
less effect.
Swearing.
Yeah, Patton apparently was, from what I read, he when he'd get people fired up, he'd do that on purpose. Oh, yeah. And then, even just in normal conversation, he didn't really swear that much. Yeah. Just one of the things. So he used it as a specific tool, to get certain things done as far as influence goes.
Yeah. I can't believe we've talked for 10 minutes about swearing. That's
right. It needed to be talked about.
Hey, we got to ask the question.